Okay, welcome to Wise Women Wednesday for Brava Women Networking. Today we've got Bridgette Triandafilidis, who brings over 40 years of hands-on experience in the financial sector services industry, including 34 years as a registered tax agent. Since launching AWC Accountants Who Communicate in 2010, Bridgette has been able to combine her industry experience with her open and casual approach to encourage questions in a safe environment to educate and support small business owners. Bridgette uses real-life examples and storytelling to illustrate complex concepts. This method is at the core of AWC Accountants Who Communicate, Accountant Who Communicates business strategy, and is what Bridgette believes sets AWC Accountants Who Communicate apart. Over to you, Bridgette.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Dia. So AWC Accountants Who Communicate. It's very interesting. There's a lot of accountants out there that do all sorts of things. I like to ensure that the clients understand what we're actually talking about. So the information that we're going to discuss today is just of a general nature, and it doesn't constitute any tax advice or otherwise, and the examples are for illustration and discussion purposes only. The topic that I've decided to talk about is income and deductions for business and common errors. So I specialise in small businesses, and they might have one employee, they might just be a mum and dad, or they might just be on their own. They might be working as a sole trader, as a company, through a trust or through a partnership. So the things that I'm highlighting today are things that have come up through the tax office, where the tax office have gone out and done audit reviews of businesses, and they've come across the most common errors. And what we're trying to do is, collectively, we're trying to educate small business owners on what is and what isn't the parameters of how they maintain their business. One of the most common things that the tax office are finding is that people aren't recording their cash income. So that means that they're under-declaring their income and that they're missing out on paying tax to the government. What I recommend people do when they're receiving cash money is, if they're spending it, they need to transfer money from their own private account into their business account for that cash that they've received. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the tax office get a true indication of what your income is. But from a business perspective, if you're receiving cash and you're not recording it, you're not going to get a fair representation of whether your business is meeting its objectives and its targets. So by having the cash being recorded through the business, we're actually capturing all the income, and you can see from year to year how you're going. This cash income can be spent in a variety of different ways, including, and we'll talk about it a bit later, including superannuation. So a lot of small businesses are forgetting to look after their superannuation and relying on the government for a pension. So we'll cover that shortly as well. So if you are receiving any cash income, make sure that it is declared, and a good way of doing that and to track it is to transfer the money from your personal account into your business account. Another area that the tax office have found that there is a lot of difficulty with is overclaiming of expenses. And what that means is claiming personal expenses as business expenses. One of the biggest ones that they're finding is fuel on cars, that people might be doing fuel for the whole family, including children, and they're not putting through fuel specific to that vehicle that's owned by the business. So they're getting a distorted or an overclaiming of the expenses. The other area is computer equipment. Often parents say, oh, well, I need a computer for my child. Oh, I'll just put it through the books. It's one of the things that I always ask people about their computer equipment. Is it business or is it personal? And often they'll say, oh, yeah, I did need that for the kids at school. I'm sorry, I paid it out of the wrong account. So just be mindful of the things that are going through your bank account, and just make sure that when you're processing it yourself or giving it to your bookkeeper, that you're being very clear with those instructions of what you're doing. I have seen quite often going through the insurance section, people are putting their private health insurance through insurance. And it's not that they're trying to overclaim the expense, it's just that they don't understand where these things go when they're allocating them in the software themselves. So that's also another area that I take particular interest in, is insurance, because not from a bookkeepers are trained not to do this, but an individual looking after their own books themselves just say, oh yeah, that's insurance. They put it all in there, not realising that if they're registered for GST, it's kicking up a problem with GST and overclaiming the GST coming back. And it's also kicking up problems because not all, maybe they do the tax return themselves, so that error isn't being picked up. So the tax office have identified that people are inadvertently overclaiming their expenses by including personal expenses as business expenses. Now, one way to overcome this is by having a really good record keeping system. So the tax office have also found that people are lack having the appropriate record keeping, particularly small business. They're not invoicing out the work that they're doing. So that's a good place to start, is by having a really good invoicing system and making sure that the invoices then can be reconciled by someone back to the income that's gone through the bank account. Having supporting documents. I had a phone call from someone yesterday. Oh, is that right that I don't need to keep all of my receipts if they're under a certain amount? No, that's not correct. If you want to claim a tax deduction for it, you need to have the receipts for it. There are really good systems that you can take photos of your receipts and it will automatically put them into accounting software. If you're not at that level requiring that kind of system, I recommend having an envelope or a folder on your computer, and as soon as an invoice comes in, just get into the habit of putting things in the same place all the time, and then going through at the end of the month and making sure those expenses have gone through your bank account, which then brings us to having a bank account. One of the big no-nos is to operate your business activities through a private bank account. So I thoroughly recommend people having a completely separate bank account to run their businesses. I actually recommend that they have two bank accounts. One bank account for the day-to-day operations of the business, and the other bank account for putting aside money for their taxes. Because what often happens is people just get used to, oh, I've got $500 in the bank, and they spend it, but they forget that they haven't actually put aside money for their taxes yet. So I recommend small businesses have two bank accounts, one which is your trading account and one which is a bank account, a savings account to cover taxes or GST or super, things like that. So if it's put into a separate account, then once a month you can say, oh, here's all the money, I'm going to pay a certain amount of money to the tax office, and for my clients I can give them the details of how they can pay that to the tax office, and they just pay their tax as they go, and then they don't have any problems. If you'd like to learn more about this, I do have a summary sheet which I can send through later. You're welcome to send me an email and I can send you through the links. There's so much information online, it's very difficult to know which ones to use. And even if you are using the links with the ATO, there's so many different links that they may not be appropriate for what you need. So what I've talked about today are on these links that we've got here. Here are some more links in relation to deductions. So working from home expenses, this can be quite a difficult process because you've got your electricity, your gas, your utilities, you've got all sorts of things going through to work from home. The tax office have different ways of allocating those. They've got some set rate ways, they've got other ways based on area. What I'd like to remind people here, which is often forgotten, is that if you work from home and you're providing a service where your clients are actually visiting you at home, you need to understand that a section of your home is going to be subject to capital gains tax when you come to sell your house in the future. So this is something that I would definitely recommend that you speak to a tax professional about. Sometimes, it depends, but sometimes you might be better off renting a space outside of the home to see your clients so that you don't get caught up in the capital gains tax aspects of that. So that's probably my biggest flag to let people know about with working from home. For example, hairdressers who work from home, doctors, architects, people that are seeing their clients at home and using a dedicated area will be subject to capital gains tax when they sell the house in the future. So definitely something worth discussing. Motor vehicle expenses. This is another one that people get a little bit caught up on as well. So what's the requirement for having a logbook? What's the requirement for using a set rate per kilometre? These things you really need to speak to a tax professional about. Often a business owner might say to the bookkeeper, oh, can you put through all my car expenses? Then as an accountant, I come to look at the books at the end of the year, and let's say their business is carried on through a company and they're putting their private car expenses through the company, they've claimed the GST, they've put everything through, and then I look at it and I say to them that car's not owned by the company. Therefore, those expenses that have gone through the company aren't deductible and they all need to be taken out. The GST has to be paid back. So you really need to be very clear about how you're going to use that car and which entity the car is being used in. So I would flag that as something to speak to a tax professional about. One area that people are looking at is superannuation. You've got different ways of paying money into super. If you want to have that super claimed as a tax deduction, it's what's called a concessional contribution. So we've got two kinds of contributions that go into a super fund. You've got concessional and non-concessional. So non-concessional, you don't claim a tax deduction for. Concessional, you do claim a tax deduction for. And these are amounts over and above whatever your employer might be obligated to pay under a super guarantee requirement. So again, if you want to pay money into superannuation, there's very clear rules and guidelines about when that can be claimed as a tax deduction and how to go about claiming it as a tax deduction. So this time of year in July, at the beginning of the tax year, is a really good time to book an appointment with your accountant to really go over these things so that you know about it now before you get to the end of the year. Because if you get to the end of the year, come May or June, it might be too late to put in place some of these strategies to get this in your cash flow budget at this time. The other thing that's quite interesting is the different business structures, and the different business structures will have different tax implications. So the business structure might be a sole trader, it might be a partnership, it might be a trust, it might be a company. So it's very important that you understand how your business is structured, because that will also dictate how you can claim your home business expenses. If you'd like any more information, I'm more than happy to have a consultation tailored specifically to you. My consultations for an hour are $330 inclusive of GST, and I'm located in Cheltenham, and I also do Zoom meetings.
All right, thank you so much, Bridgette. That's fantastic. And we'll pop those details below as well.